I'm Dimitri Mugianis. I've been a psychedelic practitioner and a harm reduction worker for over 20 years. I came to psychedelics through my own healing, uh, first with Iboga to address my 20 plus years of intravenous drug use. And I would describe myself as a ceremonialist.
Great. So the question that I'd like to ask you today is for those of us who have had a psychedelic experience and it felt like it solved a lot of our problems, and we experience a really wonderful period of time afterwards where life is really beautiful, but then that magic sort of fades and it feels a little bit like it didn't solve everything that we wanted to that we thought it solved. What would you say to people who are having that kind of experience?
What would I say to people who have experienced the sort of epiphany magic of a psychedelic experience and feel that their problems have been solved, and then they realize after time that that's not quite what happened, right? So I think there's a couple of ways to view this. First of all, it's incredibly common. It's actually not even a negative. If you had that moment, that's kind of miraculous in itself. Not everyone has that moment of clarity. I like to think of it, sometimes I like to think about it as grace. Um, in maybe not in a strict Christian sense of the definition, unmerited help from God. I'd like to remove the unmerited part and just say help. This sort of blazing, sometimes blazing, but let's just say a moment that is significant in the relieving of one's suffering. Um, it's common, and we have to look at those experiences as peak experiences, right? And by definition, if you have a peak experience, there's going to be some kind of come down from that experience. Um, and I think that's where we get into problems with over medicalization, or sometimes even the over shamanization, I don't know, but sort of a shamanic view of this in some, not all, but in some traditions, because we have to remember when we talk about shamanistic traditions, there's vastly different approaches to vastly different kinds of medicines and ways of holding. But the idea in either one of them, just broadly speaking, for the purpose of this conversation, is that the medical version and the shaman version is there's something wrong with you, and we're going to cut that out. And you may feel like that's been cut out for a while. Um, the way I like to look at it is that's the good news. Well, the bad news is that probably didn't happen in quite so a dramatic way. The good news is there's a more poetic way of looking at it, and that's why I say that we need the exactitude of the imprecisions of poetry in order to address that, because it's far more something's changing that we can't quite pin. So the deal is that once you've had these peak experiences, what do you do with them, right? How does this impact your life? The world is going to come in, and the same things that have been there before will be there, but hopefully through the psychedelic experience, you gain some kind of perspective. I believe that what these drugs, medicines deliver most consistently is perspective. So some distance between you and your relationship to depression, trauma, um, anger, or joy and playfulness. There's some spaces opened up between you and it, and then in that space there is perspective, and through this perspective, what we can call healing. So the thing is, if it's a one-off experience with someone with psychedelics and they've had that, that's one thing, and a lot can be gained for that. Working with a therapist, a support group, a clergy member, a shaman, however you want to see it, you've got material in which you can mine, right? Um, And if you decide to make psychedelics a practice, you'll get to know that, hey, this is me, and I might be walking around with this feeling, let's say in your belly or your chest or however it manifests, either physically or sort of intellectually, like you're walking around with this feeling with this set of problems, but that perspective is beginning to unloosen things a bit. And then you might notice over time with other practices that those patterns or that problem becomes less and less. With me, I had that peak experience 21 years ago with Iboga, where it interrupted my physical dependency on opiates and cocaine. And I never had a desire to use that again, but all kinds of other things that were related to it and felt very similar, although not as deadly, sort of popped up. And I've spent the last 21 years trying to filter through that. But what I think the best thing psychedelics can through that perspective, maybe a sense of love. And we've had this conversation before, you and I, Kim, but not just love, but empathy and a way in which to live in an empathetic way. Um, so I'm being kind of, I guess the bottom line is, it doesn't mean you're not changing. It doesn't mean that you're not on a healing path. It's just the way things work. It's just who we are as people. And it's both beautiful and thrilling and incredibly tragic. And, religions have been founded on it, and poems and plays and operas have been written about it. But that's where we're at. We're people. It's not going to stop our peopleness. And one other thing, we also have to remember that some of our healing is based not just on spiritual or psychological factors, but also material factors, like going back to the same job, the economic structure in which we all live, and the kind of pressures that bears for us. So, if you can be healthier, and you're seeing some change, and even if you're not noticing it, maybe other people are. But give yourself a break. It's not like it wasn't and it's not like it wasn't this beautiful experience. The other thing I can compare it to is like having a relationship with a work of art, like seeing the first time you saw an artist, right? For me, it's two artists that I can think of. Saw Iggy Pop for the first time when I was 14, and somehow my life was changed. And I saw Vermeer like soon after my Iboga thing when I was 40 in Holland, and somehow my life was changed. Now, is my life changed? Yes. Did I make a bunch of series of mistakes? Did seeing Iggy like relieve me of my humanity? No, actually, both those experiences created helped me create a relationship with my humanity that was richer and deeper. So just like art, just like an evening in the theater or a concert or a dance or whatever, that you are changed, and then you carry that change out into the world.